As I said, we're moving a little bit closer to home to
Yes.
Canada, and you and I had a wonderful conversation the other day about your thoughts on this. Now, for those who don't know Norman, you must. Norman really is somebody who pays attention to areas that others may not pay attention to and looks at it from a with a unique from a unique perspective. So Norman, let me you're based in Massachusetts. You're a businessman.
Mm.
You're the managing director of Azentis, and you work with a variety with leaders from a variety of different areas, including
Yes.
technology. So your perspective might be a little bit different than some guy who travels around this swamp or hot tub, depending on who you are. Norman, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Eli, and thank you for the opportunity. And I think you're right.
Sure.
It hits close to home, right? So everybody's really heads down doing their daily lives, and we have a neighbor up north in Canada where a lot of is going on. So personally, I have a personal interest. I'm a U.S. citizen. I was born in the United States. My parents moved to the United States from Montreal, Quebec. We kept the language. We go to Canada, well, maybe once or twice a year, visit relatives. And a personal perspective on business travel, I spent much time in I would say Quebec, Ottawa, Toronto, and as well a lot of time in British Columbia around Vancouver, a lot of technology trade there. So I have that affinity there and in the closest, and I've seen a lot of changes. And as you mentioned, I've been paying attention to it, where a lot of people are not, and they will be surprised. So, throughout history, Canadian-U.S. relations around defense, trade, culture, political agreements were envy among all the other nations because also to mention the great bordering neighbors that made trading essential for both economies. However, Eli and team is what I'm observing since 1867 for over close to 100 years. The relationship we know of today with Canada is going to be recalibrated. Not in a bad way, but good. I do believe for the better, and I will explain later. And I will talk about how Trump's 2025 national security strategy comes to play. And I'm going to save that for the end. So lately, Canada is experiencing unprecedented political landscape and economic challenges, fueling an awakening among all its provinces. And we need to ask ourselves how this all started, right? So Justin Trudeau got elected in 2015 as Prime Minister and came across as Canada's kind of like quote unquote hope and change leader, promising a better Canada and a global stature. At the same time, we have to note that Trudeau inherited then Prime Minister Stephen Harper's growing economy, which had a leading economic indicators among all of the G7. They're actually becoming the envy of G7 at one point in time with his policies that Harper had. However, further policies brought on by the Canadian Liberal Party slowed the economy and worsened by COVID and its restrictions, particularly with some of its climate change policies, restrictions over regulations. They have the over committee on some industries, particularly oil and energy. And Canada is profoundly rich in natural resources and many minerals. We're looking at some of the progressive policies in Canada, such as Canada is observing new progressive cultural policies and legislation, such as MAID, MAID, and it stands for Medical Assistance in Dying. And it reaches all ages. It's just not the senior citizens that want to have the end of life, but it passes all ages. It is a topic I wish not to talk about in full. But also, there's also Bill C-9. Bill C-9 is controlling hate speech. Sounds nice, right? Oh, it's always how it's dressed. However, it drew intense opposition from a diverse coalition of faith groups, civil liberties organizations, and labor unions. And many argue that this legislation threatens fundamental freedoms and opening the door to government overreach. It starts nice, but as we know, it goes to overreach. But we also witness the Canadian government overreach with the striking truckers during COVID, freezing their bank accounts. So as I was moving forward, so comes Mark Carney in 2025 as Prime Minister, an economist by trade, governors of both Bank of England and Bank of Canada. And by the way, we have to ask ourselves, how is the economy in England, how's that going? Not going too well. So he was elected Prime Minister, promising Canadians that he would fight Trump on trade and political advantage. We'll put back Canada in world advantage, world stage, and we don't need the United States. Essentially, that he was saying. My opinion, that's a bad move. Now what? And he tends to build Chinese EV vehicles. He's working with China to have built EV vehicles built in Canada, but he's not going to be able to send them to the United States. He's not going to be able to export them. So to add insult to injury, right, the Liberal Party of Canada, led by Prime Minister Mark Carney, officially clinched a majority of Parliament on Monday of this year, April 13th, which many consider this was a political coup. So this locks out any measures, right, such as lessening regulations to help grow the economy. Any opposing ideas keeps an arm's length, keeps it at bay. With that said, this is the current economic Canadian situation today. They are now in a recession, not a technical recession, as they say. It's a recession, 2 quarters of negative growth of GDP. They are now in the bottom of G7 in economic growth. I said earlier they were among during Harper, before 2015, they were among the top. Canadian car production is down 15% from last year. Overregulation in some key industries burdened by what they call research committee consultants. You have UMESCO, UMESCO, United States Mexico and Canada, the trade agreement, which they are not participating, but the Mexico economy grew 1.2. So I'm very perplexed, and many are perplexed, including myself, is if Mark Carney is an economist and a banking governor of 2 countries at one point, why is his policies are not working? And we have to ask ourselves, is he, I'm not being brash, is he an incompetent economist or is it an agenda? I'm leaning towards the latter, and it'll explain along with Trump's national security strategy. At this point in Canada's decline, many awakened Canadian citizens are comparing it to Venezuela and its parity 15 years ago. They're asking themselves, are they really going down that path? Are they going to control destruction? A lot of questions remain unanswered. Also, they have provincial challenges. Alberta, most of the taxes in that province go to other provinces. So they have and also now they have all the signatures to have the vote into this coming October to succeed from Canada, to separate, and to start that process. Now they're having challenges with referendum. They come out with these last minute, brought on by Mark Carney, saying, well, you might have some challenges, some territorial, original, the original Indians, that may be some factor there. But also Quebec, the province of Quebec, is gaining momentum with a new generation of voters. We're seeing a whole new swath of voters now that's coming in, a swing of voters, and they want to sustain its culture, its language, and economic independence. There's a history of province of Quebec trying to separate for a number of years since René Lévesque was prime minister in the mid-70s, but it never passed through. If you think United States policy towards that, we stayed silent. Because if you think about that time, the United States did not want another growing economic power, perhaps, in my opinion, because Quebec will be able to grow because
So,
Quebec has an opportunity
Norman,
to be economic power.
let me just quickly ask you, can you quickly just tell us what is your thought on President Trump and how he should engage? We have about 35 seconds left, but what do
Yep.
you think how President Trump should engage Canada right now?
You know what? My answer, my opinion is Trump should just let it go, right? Let the pain subside. He can't do nothing. It's their country, right? They're going to control their sovereignty. But when it comes to trade, my opinion is let the national security strategy succeed. And what that document is called it's Trump's corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, stating that United States should assert leadership through the Western Hemisphere and preventing hostile foreign powers from gaining influence. Let it be China and Iran, right? It's preventing mass migration. It's strengthening partnerships, right? So that is the antithesis of Mark Carney, right? He has long-standing objectives of a united world collaboration versus national sovereignty. So the answer to your question, in my opinion, is Trump wants in the Western Hemisphere, right, national sovereignty. We can trade among ourselves, right? We could be the more powerful than Monroe Doctrine is that my opinion is what Trump needs to do is let Canada be Canada, let Mark Carney's policy fail out, I should say, and then envelope in the NSS strategy that's going to create a bigger bloc. And we have to show by example. We're seeing what Mexico is being very well attuned. The relationship with Mexico is not perfect, but it's improving economically. They see it increasing. They're participating in the U.S. Mexico Canada agreement. So I would say that in time, Trump's NSS policy, the national security policy, strategy policy, is going to be more advantage, and you see Canada enveloping that. Mark Carney
Okay,
cannot
I
have.
appreciate that. So your answer is Canada should be more like Mexico. Um, that
That
works. If you have a paper on this, I would love for you to forward it to me. We will disseminate it to everybody on the call so they can see more about it.